Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad. In today's program, we are going to take up for discussion any possibility regarding any potential ceasefire as far as the crisis in Ukraine is concerned. With US President Donald Trump has said the US will send top-of-the-line weapons to Ukraine via NATO countries. The president has also threatened Russia at the same time with severe sanctions if a deal to end the war in Ukraine is not reached within 50 days. After the meeting with the NATO chief, President Trump said, "We want to make sure Ukraine can do what it wants to do." Now, the NATO chief has confirmed that the US has decided to massively supply Ukraine with what is necessary through NATO and that the Europeans would foot the bill. We've also seen a response from the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. He has described President Trump's remarks as quite serious. Further adding, let me quote, "We undoubtedly need to analyze what was said in Washington, and if and when President Putin deems it necessary, he will certainly comment on it," unquote. In a separate interview, President Donald Trump has said, let me quote, "I am disappointed in him," referring to Russian President Vladimir Putin, "but I am not done with him, but I am disappointed in him," unquote. Now, President Donald Trump had set ending the war in Ukraine as one of his foreign policy priorities in his election campaign. Russia in March had said that it welcomed President Donald Trump's proposal for a comprehensive ceasefire in Ukraine. But first, Western military aid and intelligence sharing should end along with Ukrainian military mobilization. These important developments on this particular front, for that we are honored to be joined in the studio by Dr. Nouman Sattar. He is American Affairs and Senior Analyst. Dr. Sattar, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Ms. Naela Chohan, former ambassador and former Special Secretary to Foreign Affairs. And Ms. Naela, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Nouman Sattar, when we talk about this particular threat of massive tariffs, also that announcement of supplying Ukraine with the top-of-the-line weapons by President Donald Trump, do we see it as a marked shift in his tone as far as Russian President Vladimir Putin vis-a-vis crisis in Ukraine is concerned?
I would say yes. There is a marked change in his tone, and I would say also in his approach. We have seen since he came to power, he has been to the presidency, he has been keen to end this conflict, and we have seen him ending two conflicts. So now I think he got more encouragement, and maybe he got more eager to end this conflict that he has been in touch with.
Ending two conflicts, you are specifically talking about Pakistan and India,
Pakistan and Israel and Iran.
Israel
and
right.
Iran. So he thinks he can do it. And most probably he can do it. And when he talks about sanctions, of course he has talked with President Putin as well on this. And when he now talks of sanctions, and he talks of delivering anti-defense missile systems to Zelensky, to Ukraine, and then also when he gives him like a 50-day, let's say, deadline. That means he is really serious, and he's keen to war, for the war to end. Let's say on the terms that he is like professed, and like he has suggested, and but of course it's not that easy. So there is a great change in his tone, and he seemed to be in an urgency, because of course till this time we see no end to the Gaza conflict. So I think he would is now focusing more to end this conflict, because it has been going on for almost 3 years now.
So what immediate factors do you think have actually led him to shift his tone as well approach towards Russia and Russian President Vladimir Putin? We've seen a number of high-level contacts between the two countries after President Donald Trump took over the office. We have largely seen that very sort of a tone that gave us an understanding that happened to be a friendly overture on part of President Donald Trump towards Russian President Vladimir Putin. So what immediate factors do you think have contributed to this change?
I would say basically his personality. He gets impatient. He wants to get things done, and as mentioned earlier, he has had like his way. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, when he talked to President Putin, his efforts, or you can say his suggestions, were welcomed. And I would say he was hopeful that the war would end soon. But I'm sure there are many factors involved in this. Like
So there are two things that you've mentioned in your take, that he seems to be serious in ending the war.
Yes.
And at the same time, the primary factor that you've talked about pertains to his personality, the impatience.
Yes.
We can see after this. Or do we understand that this particular personality trait of President Donald Trump is quite different from actually what the ground situation as far as this particular crisis is concerned is?
Okay. We have to go to the background a little bit.
Or that very impatience is divorced from the ground reality? Let me rephrase
When
it
he
that way.
was sort of not like so warm toward supporting Ukraine. There was a time, like maybe a couple of months back, for a very short while, and I would say he realized that that would not work, and of course both the sides now are attacking each other with drones, etc., and missiles. So if the war prolongs, it's going to be more difficult. As we see any conflict that prolongs, it's difficult to address. So if the war goes on further, like maybe the next year, next 6 months, so it's not going to be easy, and we'd see that his plans or whatever he envisioned, he would be on a back seat, that he did not succeed. So I think he's sort of pushing it now. He's pushing it, and he would like to end it like on the term agree.
Pushing it with an approach, with the threat at the same time, and also announcement of giving Ukrainians whatever is necessary to do what they want to do. I'll come back to you with this particular approach.
And just quickly, more of a stick and less of a carrot.
More of a stick and less of a carrot. Yes. Ambassador Naela Chohan, what's your understanding? Is it a marked shift when it comes to the tone? Is it only pertaining to the tone, or do you also see any sort of a drastic shift as far as President Donald Trump's approach towards Russia and the Ukraine conflict is concerned? And what immediate factors do you think have actually led to his shift in both of these dimensions?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to your program. It's a very important question. I think the recent NATO summit that was held, in which President Trump had also participated, the Western countries are very keen to support Ukraine. And Mr. Donald Trump always thought that Putin was, a very strong man, and he has respect for strong men. And he had a good chemistry with Mr. Putin, President Putin. So he thought that President Putin would respect his, statement that the war should end. If you recall, on 20th of January, President Trump took office, and before taking office, he had said, this is a war of 1 or 2 days and not more.
Yeah.
But it lingered on. So it kind of surprised him, because he had already spoken to President Putin, and he thought that President Putin would honor his, request. But that didn't happen. There are many factors that played in, because the EU member countries were playing on. They were still pushing Ukraine to keep the war going. If you remember the Spider operation, in which they had sent their, drones, how they penetrated into the Russian systems and destroyed their, arsenal. So Mr. Putin had to then continue. But I think President Trump's visit to NATO had a lot to do with it, and that's why he has said that this will be funded by the EU member countries, the NATO member countries. Because he had called on the NATO member country that if you want to continue this war, you have to foot the bills. We are willing to give the maximum weaponry you wish, but you will be the one to pay. There were certain NATO member countries that were not that excited about it, like Spain and a few others. But France, Germany, UK, they were very interested in it. And that's why I think it is at behest of these countries that Mr. Trump decided to continue with Ukraine, but basically he still has a soft corner for Russia because he's given 50 days time. So it's not an immediate action. And he has said that within 50 days, if they don't find a solution, then the reaction from USA will be very strong. And like you showed in your reel here also, that Foreign Minister Lavrov said that we have taken it very seriously. So it is not that Russia is not taking it seriously, but the dynamics of Europe, of how the EU member countries and NATO member countries are playing on the Ukraine card against Russia has a lot to do with it. And now the sanctions that, the secondary sanctions that President Trump has spoken of also will matter, because then countries like India will be affected that were using Russian commodities and selling it with their own profits. So it will have far-reaching repercussions. It will not just be Russia. So the situation is now a little grim. Russia realizes it. As you see, UK has come up with its new defense strategy paper, in which they have decided to now they make their forces more war fighting forces, because as yet they were more of, you know, presentation of forces, but now they are making them more, I mean, as they say, fanging them, you know. So the dynamics of Europe are changing, but we must also bear in mind that the EU member countries are confronted with very serious economic issues, energy issues, gas issues. So it's not something they can sustain, especially if they have to foot the bills. So let's see how it goes. But I think the situation right now, after Mr. Trump's statement, has become grim. And
as to this particular aspect that you have just talked about quite in detail, the role of the European countries, the major powers over there in that particular region, what I understand from your take is it is perhaps the major objective that pertains to these European countries that is actually taking the lead in the entire equation at this particular moment, given the fact that you've also described with the kind of energy issues the European countries have been facing, would be facing. What largely remain to be the objectives of these leading European countries as far as the Ukraine crisis is concerned? Does it only pertain to expansion of NATO, or are there other objectives these European countries are trying to get out of this particular Ukraine crisis? I'll come back to you. We are honored to be joined by another participant on the video link, Mr. Umar Waqar Khan. He's expert in international relations. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Now, President Donald Trump has given 50-day ultimatum to Russia to end the war in Ukraine. The possibilities associated with this particular time span, do you think it's quite achievable, or it's not going to happen within 50 days? And if it's not going to happen within 50 days, what are going to be the likely options when it comes to President Donald Trump and his policy towards Russia is concerned?
Well, when it comes to Russia, I just received one of the security officials, Mr. Medvedev, in fact, said that it's all theatrics when it comes to Mr. Donald Trump's statement. So, if the seriousness of the issue is concerned, yes, maybe Mr. Donald Trump has got some cards up his sleeve, because uh, for his entire election campaign, or even before the Ukraine-Russia war started, he was very pro-Russia when it comes to that sort of an issue. In fact, he also slapped Mr. President Zelensky while giving the
Seek
presidency.
your pardon for the interjection over here. I think there's a little bit of distortion. We'll try to reconnect with you. As soon as we reconnect with you, we'll try to understand your take regarding as to these particular developments. Dr. Sattar, now, what do the European countries want out of this entire equation?
Okay, my views are somewhat bit different from what I heard from Ambassador Chohan. I think European countries mostly they would like the war to end and war to end soon, just as the message Mr. Trump has given. The reason being, so long as the war of course the war has been going on on the European continent for almost 3 years, and so long as the war goes on, the conflict is there, their security is strained. One. Second, I don't think they can have normal trade and other relations with Russia that most of them would like to have. So they are keen to have that. But then Mr. Trump, as a president of a superpower or a major power, he comes with this proposal, and at the NATO summit, I'm sure he must have discussed this with his allies, and he must have convinced them that the policy or the strategy that he has would work. That is, he supplies the Ukraine with state-of-the-art like Patriot missiles, etc. And
of course, the Europeans are going to fund it.
Yeah,
right?
they are going to
so
fund
they are
it.
going to foot the bill.
So my point.
So if actually the Europeans are interested to end the war over there, why would they like to fund, especially when given the fact they have been facing energy issues, the number of issues which have already been mentioned by Ambassador Naela Chohan.
That's what I've been trying to tell you, that Mr. Trump convinced them that if they pay for this and we sort of arm Ukraine
so now, as far as I remember, President Donald Trump had a very clear-cut stance regarding as to the funding of NATO, and he wanted the European countries themselves to bear the burden of that. So looking at this particular saga that has unfolded just right now, it seems to be following the very same line. So apparently, it doesn't seem that there is much at stake as far as the US itself is concerned. So if the funding is going to happen from the Europeans, so that is pretty much in line what Donald Trump had been wanting over the years.
If you recall, during the last term, these things were not so well taken in Europe. And in this term, and like when he bounces back, he comes back, as I said, I repeat the same thing again, he has been able to convince the Europeans that this is one way, that the right way to deal with Russia and to help Ukraine stand up to the Russia, or maybe what Mr. Putin wants in Russia, of course, he wants in Ukraine. So I would still say he has been able to convince the Europeans that this is one way that Ukraine can maybe withstand Russian assaults and maybe recover lost territories before they come to a sort of settlement with Russia. So I think I don't know if the word is right to use the word magic. His magic worked with the European allies.
Mr. Khan, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you properly.
Okay, please go ahead. Please resume from where we left, because there was a little bit of distortion. We can hear you loud and clear right now.
Yeah, basically what I wanted to mention was that when it comes to Mr. Trump's statement, the Russians have already responded with their top security official, Mr. Medvedev, saying that this is all theatrics and we are going to wait as to how things are going to unfold. Because right now what you are witnessing inside eastern Ukraine is, I would say that the Russians are at a clear advantage when it comes to, outperforming the Ukrainian and NATO military might. If you look at the slightly geographical dynamics when it comes to Ukraine's, Mr. Trump doesn't actually understand that what's the Russian point is. Because previously, Mr. Putin, including his administration, decided that all they want right now is complete demilitarization of the eastern part of Ukraine when it comes to east of the Dnipro River. And after that, we can agree to an unconditional ceasefire. These objectives were considered as, very bad when it comes to Ukraine, because at the end of the day, it's the country that is being affected, and the occupied, states like Donetsk Oblast, Zaporozhye, Kharkiv, and these regions. But right now, what Mr. Trump is suggesting, that we are going to go with the, Patriot missile deal with Ukraine or to supply it further. We should just remind Mr. Trump that around 30 to 35% already the amassed NATO munition supplies inside Ukraine have been destroyed by the Russians in their so-called counteroffensive inside Zaporozhye back in 2024, as well as a big offensive in Kursk region by the Ukrainian forces when they captured the region of Sudza. They lost a lot of forces there. And right now, when it comes to mobilization issues inside Ukraine, Mr. Trump thinks that he can solve this issue just like what he tried to, unfold after things happened between India and Pakistan. But when it comes to Russia and European real politics, the situation is completely different right now. Russia has the majority of the cards right now on the table since it is outproducing NATO countries when it comes to munition supplies. It is outproducing its oil supplies.
So the term that you have used, that the Russians have got majority of the cards over here at this particular point in time.
Exactly,
This is
exactly.
more
That's
or
what I'm
less
saying.
very similar, if I'm remembering it correctly, it is very much similar to that very term that was used, the kind of conversation that we witnessed when President Zelensky called on President Donald Trump at the White House. President Trump used the same terms at that particular meeting also, and that particular meeting, that conversation, as and when it happened, made quite top headlines around the world. So, do you think this particular shift, that very use of those terms, that Ukrainians didn't have the cards at that particular point in time? So, given the fact that Russians have got majority of the cards in their hands, the military advantage at this particular critical juncture, what immediate factors do you think have led President Donald Trump to shift from that very stance that he was taking before President Zelensky to this particular decision of threatening Russia with 100% tariffs, as well as supplying Ukrainians with Patriot missile systems?
Well, you need to, I would say, go back into politics when it comes to United States. When it comes to Mr. Trump, he has a very, I would say, toy relationship when it comes to with its compatriots inside the establishment. The establishment of United States currently favors Ukraine a lot when it comes to the military establishment as well as the Central Intelligence Agency. So they are seeing this as a political victory for Russia, and irrespective of what Mr. Trump does, he has to succumb to that establishment pressure when it comes to Ukraine. So keeping ensuring that the European partners are also on board, they are also encouraged to participate inside Ukraine against Russia. That's the calling card, particularly of the CIA, that they want to ensure that we have to, irrespective of what's the outcome of the war, we have to inflict as much damage to the Russian military industrial complex as much as we can with the limited time they have. Because right now, what we are witnessing, two of the major eastern cities, the Konstantinivka front as well as the Pokrovsk front, they are being engulfed by the Russian forces, and sooner or later, that's the tipping point and the edge of the war. And after that, it's all hell is going to break loose inside Ukraine. So they are trying to ensure that US and its allies ensure that they can do as much damage as they can in this small amount of time.
So there are two different. I want your understanding regarding as to what response from the Kremlin spokesperson has been. That he's described these remarks by President Trump as quite serious, also saying we undoubtedly need time to analyze what was said in Washington, and if and when President Putin deems it necessary, he will certainly comment on it. There was one remark made by Mr. Dmitry Medvedev, who has dismissed Trump's statements, which you have already mentioned in your earlier take, if I got that correctly, as a theatrical ultimatum. Now, how do you compare these two responses? Are they different, or is there any sort of
Yes, because
similarity?
when it comes to Donald Trump right now, likewise, what he mentioned to Mr. Zelensky that he doesn't have all the cards. He also mentioned that yes, the Russians might have lost a lot of troops. So has Ukrainians, including what the massed equipment being exported inside Ukraine by the European partners. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the survival instinct of the Russians, when it comes to attrition warfare, they're masters of it. They have done this to Napoleon's France. They have done this to the Third Reich, and they can do this to NATO countries as well. So Trump needs to likewise think that an unconditional ceasefire and vacation from the Ukrainian Russian occupied parts inside Ukraine is not feasible right now. So the understanding that what the Russians have come up that this is just theatrics is exactly like that because they actually feel emboldened
that they do have the cards still right now, and majority of the cards, and dominantly the US and European allies are going to come to terms to this. They have to realize this new reality as soon as possible before things turn out to be for the worse.
Right, Mr. Khan, I'll come back to you for your understanding regarding a number of other aspects. Ambassador Naela Chohan, would you like to comment on as to what the objectives of the Europeans basically are? A number of points which have been made by Dr. Nouman Sattar as well.
I agree with Umar Waqar's analysis. It is true. Basically, if you look how it developed, the EU member countries or the NATO member countries, how did this war start? Mr. Putin, Russia, had stated categorically that don't provoke Ukraine, that's a red line. And they still did that. Ukraine was never to be part of NATO, but they made this offer. And yet they did not make it a member because Zelensky tried many a times and it was not given NATO membership. So they were basically EU member countries and NATO member countries were playing it on. And even now, Russians, as Usman Waqar says, are emboldened because they know the ground reality that if they have to foot the bills for the American arms, they will not be in a position to do so because already their economies are in shambles. So they just wanted USA to come in and take their war vis-a-vis Russia. But Mr. Trump was very smart. He said, if you're willing to pay, I'll send the best arms. Now, we have to wait for response from NATO countries also. Are they really willing to pay that much? Because if they're willing to pay, why didn't they develop their own armies to a level where they wanted to take it over? They could not. They sent their arms and support to Ukraine and it has yet not succeeded. It has just lingered the war. And if you recall, when President Trump met President Zelensky, he said, you are responsible for the death of your people. You could have ended this war, you did not do so. And you don't have any cards. And at this moment, what Mr. Trump has said is in the presence of the Secretary General of NATO. So you can see the dynamics, how NATO member countries in general, EU member countries, they are trying to continue this war. Keep Ukraine, bleeding Russia. But Russia has a lot of potential to linger this war. Mr. Trump doesn't want any lingering. He wants solution, ceasefire, end of it, irrespective of what terms.
Was there any sort of a goodwill that was established after President Donald Trump took over the office?
I think the goodwill is there.
Between Russia and the US?
That is there because he wouldn't have given 50 days to them. He would have said, we are sending them immediately now, but he didn't do that. He said, you have 50 days to decide.
Let's go a little back in history. He gave 2 weeks time when it came to Iran and Israel
conflict. And he reverted, so you don't know.
After hardly 2 days had lapsed, and, the US directly intervened and targeted those nuclear facilities of Iran. So do we take this ultimatum on the face of it, that it's going to be actually the ultimatum for 50 days in actual, or are there going to be any sort of surprises?
I think their dynamics are different. Because vis-a-vis Iran, it was the Israeli lobby, the APEC, that was playing the cards, right? So when APEC pressurized, they had to. If you recall, his son-in-law, President Trump's son-in-law, is basically son of the former president of APEC. So they have a very strong Jewish lobby there. But in this case, as far as Russia and Ukraine are concerned, it is different dynamics. And Mr. Trump does seem to have a soft corner for Mr. Putin. And that's why he's given him 50 days. And he also knows that Europeans are not potent enough to really continue this fight.
So what after 50 days?
I think there will be backdoor negotiations which might have already started. And Russians are also master of negotiations, and they will come up with some solution. But how do the European, the EU countries play their role remains to be seen, because it is at their behest that this whole game is continuing, even if it is detrimental to their economy, so they can't sustain it either. So that's why I said before, the situation
So if the Europeans are not in a position, if they are not going to sustainably fund this particular backing towards Ukraine, so where that equation leads from there? Does the war stop?
Yeah,
A
I hope
ceasefire
so.
very much within reach?
It's them who are egging it on. It's the NATO member countries that are basically pushing the war forward. Otherwise, as Mr. Usman Waqar said, Russia has all the potential and they can continue it for as long as they wish. But Ukraine doesn't have that ability. It only survives on what support they are getting from EU. And EU at this moment is not in a very comfortable situation as far as the economy is concerned and their defense forces are concerned. So I don't see this to linger on much. I think there will be backdoor negotiations between Russia and USA, and probably they'll come to some kind of solution.
Right. Dr. Nouman, Sattar, was there any goodwill that was established between Russia and the US after President Donald Trump took over the office? And these latest statements by President Donald Trump, what sort of an impact do you think it is going to have on this particular bilateral relationship, keeping aside for a moment what Europeans are up to, what do they want out of this entire equation, where the Ukrainians stand? How is this new threat and statement and announcement on the part of President Trump going to affect the bilateral relationship with Russia?
There was surely goodwill publicly between Russia and the US, we can say between President Trump and President Putin. And I'll repeat, with Mr. Trump's hope that he can make a difference and he can end that conflict. And he, of course, talked to him a couple of times. And I think he was, let's say, optimistic about those talks. But then when he saw that things are sort of getting out of hand, it's not, the war is not ending and Russia not coming to terms. And we have also seen Ukraine attacking deep inside Russia. So I think both for the US as well for the European countries, European allies, this is not a good sign. Any war continuing in Europe, that means sort of they have failed to face Russia or fight Russia or for forcing it to back down. So I think this forced or pushed Mr. Trump to come up with this statement. And when we just talked about the deadline, it could be beyond 50 days, it could come back, it would be less than 50 days. And I would agree with Ambassador Chohan that they might come to some sort of an, let's say, pre-ceasefire agreement, something like that, within this time. I'm hopeful.
Who has the
and
cards?
there are chances of that.
Who has majority of the cards? Do you agree with the two other participants as well?
Well, not
as far as
I would
Russia?
disagree on that, because Ukraine has more support, stronger American support than it had earlier. It had more open Western support, EU or NATO support than it had earlier. So I won't say Russia has all the cards with these new missile systems coming in and President Trump.
So what could be the possible contours when we talk about any sort of a potential ceasefire between the two sides? Whether within a time span of 50 days or if the backdoor negotiations happen on a very speedy pace, or whether it happens after 50 days, that actually suits the Russian side the most when it comes to addressing Russians' concerns as far as the NATO's expansion is concerned, firstly, as well as that very intelligence sharing and the military aid towards Ukraine from the Western countries is concerned.
Okay, I'll just make 2 points. The one is about this state-of-the-art systems and military aid coming to Ukraine from the Western sides, both US and NATO, how much impact it can make on the war and what's going on the ground, one. And secondly, looking at the ceasefire, that's not anywhere in sight, how much Russia is willing to, or how much land Russia is willing to vacate or withdraw from. I would say if those 2 points are clear, or between these two countries, I would say between Russia and the US, I think ceasefire would be easier. I think probably that would be the main thing. The impact of these systems.
So if Russia doesn't concede, then the possibility of any ceasefire in that sort of a situation?
Then sanctions. And I think we are clear that I think sanctions and maybe like.
So by looking at these responses from the Russian side, at what position do you think as far as these sanctions and the threat of sanctions by President Donald Trump is concerned?
I think, see, it's up to President Trump. He says, he speaks, and the sanctions are there. So that's why he gave them 50 days. That's quite a bit of time for them to like consider, like maybe maybe talk about it and maybe decide. So he gives them ample time for that. So I think he has kept the field open for Russia.
Mr. Khan, what's your understanding? This particular threat of imposing severe sanctions, tariffs, as far as tariffs are concerned, from President Donald Trump on Russia, what sort of global implications do you think it might going to have?
I really don't think that's going to have that much of an influence when it comes to Russian economy. The war has been going for quite some time. Russia has faced the biggest sanctions the West has imposed on them. They have thrived. They have ensured that their economy stands upright. Their oil supplies are going to their biggest, I would say, importers when it comes to China as well as India. In fact, a lot of EU countries are also still buying LPG, petroleum products from Russia that are part of the European Union. So at the end of the day, when it comes to sanctions or such issues, Russia has already maneuvered away from it for the last 3 years. It has maneuvered from everything that would have damaged its economy, and it has surpassed its capacity to ensure that its military-industrial complex as well as its economic affairs survive in this war. So at the end of the day, what you were discussing when it comes to the ceasefire, the Russians are only going to be satisfied that if the occupied regions that the Russians have occupied are actually given to the Russians in some sort of a treaty, or they could be considered as autonomous regions with their own separate governance system. That was predominantly the issue discussed back in the 2015 Minsk Accord as well, when it came to Russian-speaking separatists inside Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which resulted in that they wanted a separate autonomy base as well as position in the central government, so that there should be at least a consensus between both the Ukrainian and Russian community-speaking regions of the Western Ukraine as well as the Eastern Ukraine. So
is Ukraine going to concede on that, Mr. Khan?
Ukraine is definitely not going to agree to such terms. They are going to fight for whatever they can right now. But likewise, the only thing that keeps the Ukrainian economy running is complete, I would say, dominance in economic as well as military affairs by the Western side. If they stamp that out from Ukraine, then Ukraine is going to lose within a couple of days. This is exactly.
Get your point, Mr. Umar Waqar Khan, expert in international relations. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we were joined by Ms. Naela Chohan, former ambassador and former special secretary to Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Naela, thank you very much for your time for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Nouman Sattar, expert in American affairs. Thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.